Welcome, everybody, to the Pitch Black Beacon with your hosts, Joshua and Carly. Here on our station, we are the light that our listeners can use to overcome the obstacles in the pursuit of their more fulfilling lives.
And I am your host, Carly, like you said, and we are here talking about discipline and motivation today and kind of introducing ourselves to the show. So welcome everybody to Pitch Black Beacon. We're so excited to get this started. Joshua, this has been in the works for how long now?
Quite some time, a little bit actually. A few obstacles, but we're
Yeah,
gonna hopefully it turns out to be a good experience. So.
Well, and you know what though? Life always has obstacles. Even when you feel like you finally got to that like next level, then there's just more obstacles on your way to the next level of life.
Absolutely. I
Because there's always
agree.
more fulfillment to be had.
And the trick is to find guidance and how to deal with these obstacles in a positive and more
Productive
fulfilling
way.
productive way.
In a productive way. Yeah. Well, and the thing I like about what we're going to be bringing to our show is that like we've two different unique personalities that have like a great blend. And part of what every listener is looking for is like those hosts that they can really connect to and really relate to and feel like, oh my gosh, these just people say it in a way that makes sense to me. And so, even in us trying to get Pitch Black Beacon up and going, like you said, we had our own obstacles, but we were motivated and we had to put in the self-discipline. And part of that discipline was us waiting for the right time.
Right, absolutely. And the motivation was definitely there because the passion for trying to help change the mindsets and reevaluate your own lives and in your everyday lives styles. It's not an easy task. It's definitely something to work for, and
To
you
be
have to be,
desired.
yeah, have to have something to be desired, and you got to continue with not just motivation, because motivation isn't always enough. So that's where the discipline does come in, and that is where the focus should mainly be is on your discipline, because discipline doesn't really, it doesn't care if you're tired or if you're upset
Well, discipline
or
is a habit where motivation is an emotion, right? And
right.
emotions like come and go. But that's
Yes.
when the discipline has to be in a good foundation. That's something that you've taught me because as an ADHD person, I'll get like real excited about something for about what, 48 hours? And then just
Yeah.
be like, just kidding. And you're like, I thought you were doing that thing. And I was like, I did most of it.
Yeah.
And
And
that accountability, having an accountability or having people, the thing I like about podcasts and other types of communities is that it gives people something to look forward to and it gives them like a target on their growth process, something to check in with and see where they've been at since the last time they listened to it.
definitely, yeah, kind of like writing it down. Like if you write stuff down, you it's kind of like an accountability system as well. So if you ever feel the need, definitely write things down and stay on your goals and tasks. So that'll keep you motivated and disciplined at the same time.
And that's one thing that I think is going to be fun with this podcast too, is just like your personal experience and then like my understanding of like you have a very good understanding of like the mental state of the body and like the spiritual components of the body. And I have a very good physiological understanding of the body and being able to bring those components together to like help listeners thrive off of that. Because like when you say write something down, what I hear in my brain is like, oh, then you're like tangibly doing it. You're visually seeing it. You have the sensation of the motor skills of having written it out. And then and then it gets imprinted into your brain, right? Like you're using multiple
Correct.
senses in that process of just writing it down. And so when you write something down, you're actually like holding yourself accountable to like a minimum of 3 of your senses.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then, yeah, well, it's just like you said. Just and I like the visual aspect of it the most too, because when you see it, it just, I don't know, there's just something about looking at it and seeing it that makes it a little more
Impactful.
Impactful. Yes, that's a good word for it.
Well, because most people are visual people, right? And when we don't have a vision, a physical vision of what we're going for, then our brain often fills in the gaps. And so when you're writing something out that you're wanting to be working towards, having that visual representation, whether it's like a vision board, a picture, outline, however, correlates to you, is so helpful because then you gain clarity on what it is you're wanting. And then you notice that there's gaps missing and you start filling in those gaps instead of letting it just, if it's never written down, then it's kind of like a blank canvas with blurred pictures with no clarity. So that writing it down really helps us as humans to visualize.
Hmm.
And when we visualize, then we understand better. And when we understand better, we can attract those things into our life, because once we start seeing it on a regular basis, our body starts believing that it's already there. And when we believe it's already there, then we start working towards it. We start noticing different opportunities as we work towards those goals
That's
that
right.
help get us there faster.
Power of manifestation. Boom.
Exactly.
Love it.
Exactly. What is one discipline and motivation that you have found to be like very impactful in your growth journey?
So well, I would say that I started off with the motivation to create just a time-based life where I had time to do anything I wanted. So that was my motivation. But my discipline for that is
Like the time freedom, like a time freedom lifestyle?
right, like a time freedom lifestyle. Like I want to be able to just, have my life on autopilot, and then I can, be free to do what I need to and check up on stuff when I need to. That's life. That's my motivation.
Mhm.
Discipline comes in where now I'm just taking the action, right? I'm
Mhm.
putting the plan in place. I'm executing on that plan. I'm getting the things that I need to do, or the materials that I need for this plan so that I can create it in the physical and put it into an impactful way of my life and start that journey, like build from bottom up. And that's the discipline, is consistency of
Mhm.
day to day
Despite how you
wins.
feel about it.
Right. And even if I'm tired or miserable or I'm sad, I'm still working towards that something, that little bitty thing. I mean, it could be for, one little item to 6 items, or, whatever it is that you need to put in place, printing papers off, or getting your business written down on paper. Just those little wins every day will build up and be into a consistent, impactful, everything. That's how it starts. And
Well, when you're talking about this, it definitely reminds me of different conversations that we've had where you remind me often that like everything starts with a thought. Like everything starts in the mind, everything starts as a thought. And when it becomes a thought, it takes action. When it takes action, it becomes physical in our environment, right? And so like what I'm
right,
hearing you is like part of the discipline is like the emotional mental labor of planning, figuring out, changing your mindset, doing the things that you need to do to be able to get to taking the action, and having
correct.
having compassion with yourself along the way. Because I think with us, with this Pitch Black Weekend project, that getting us to this point where we started a podcast, it was very quick for us to design our logo. And then when we got together to like make our mission, like that came together really quickly, and my energy was like, we need to do this. We need to keep on this. We need to get it done tomorrow. We need to get, we have to stay on top of it. But before we could move forward with it, there was a lot of mental, emotional stuff that had to fall into place before the time was ready. And you're like, no, the time's not ready yet. We have to like trust the process. Like we will know when the time is ready. And if we force it sooner, it's not going to work out because we're forcing it. And we have to wait till it's like we have all the steps in place first. And my personality was like, screw the steps. Let's just jump on top of that box. And you're like, no, we have to build the foundation. We got to take our time. We got to do it right. And, I'm so grateful that, that's why you have to have friends in the process of your growing process, or, people that you're sharing your growth process with, or even if it's just yourself. Like, hey, last week I wrote, this, and this week I did this, and look at that growth. Like you have that person or, that self-reflection to be able to keep pushing yourself forward and to assess and evaluate as you go. Like, is this the right time? What's holding me back? Am I forcing this? Am I not forcing this? Because when we're in alignment with what God wants us to do in life and what our purpose is, it really should never be forced. It should,
Right.
there might be challenges, but it's never forced.
It's got to be a calculated risk. You got to take risks in order to make success, but you have
Mm-hmm.
to be calculated about it as well, because otherwise you can, and and sometimes you lose, and sometimes you lose a lot, and but
You get those growing pains.
but it's the growing pains, and it helps you learn what not to do, and then you could push forward with a new direction and see if that's what to do or what not to do again. But definitely always make sure it's calculated, because if you're just jumping into the deep end right away, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt, in a place you don't want to be in, and then you're going to just lose everything. So you always have to just kind of put those foundation steps in place. Start with the little stuff. Start with, like if you're going to create a company, start with getting an LLC, make everything right. And
Or
then from
even
there,
before starting an LLC, doing your research on different LLC
or
companies.
right, doing your research on them, or understand, or actually the first thing you should do is get a piece of paper and figure out what it is that you are passionate about, and really want to do and could create into something that's going to build an entire life, a legacy, and motivation for timeless life.
Well, and
That's the first thing you should do.
right, and but not everybody wants that time freedom lifestyle, So
but
it
but
could
that's
even
just one
be
example. you
right.
know
It could even be with like a workout plan or a
right.
better routine in your life or whatever,
Or I'll use another example of mine. Like, I always wanted to be the best skateboarder, and I would discipline myself to being outside every single day on that skateboard for hours. Like,
rain or
not even,
shine.
yeah, rain or shine. I didn't care about my grip tape. Grip tape was like $7 or something. You could replace it. It was nothing. It was just being on that skateboard for at least an hour or longer every single day. And that's how you progress, and that's how I got better. And as you got better, you could do bigger things, and doing bigger things means more confidence, and more confidence means higher success rate. And
And I feel like confidence and discipline go really hand in hand because you kind of have to be
oh,
confident
absolutely.
in yourself. And I read something recently that was just like you gain confidence after you do the thing. You don't have the confidence going into it, right? Because you don't
Right.
know what you're getting into. But
Right.
you can have false confidence, like, okay, I can do this, where you give yourself a pep talk and then you do it. And then afterwards, you're like, okay, now my body has experienced the thing. Now I actually have the physical and mental confidence to go along with it. Because before we just have the mental confidence, but our body and our mind have to be in alignment. And having that opportunity to like build the confidence while you have these disciplines, you're going to, like you said, you're going to fail. You're going to have these growing opportunities. You're going to have the growing pains while you do it, but it doesn't mean that you stop, you know,
Right.
you just give yourself a pat on the back for making it this far and keep going,
Right. The guy,
reassess and pivot if you have to.
right. Exactly. The guy who never stops is the guy who never quits. Right.
Because you know what? I every time I start something thinking this is how this is going to go. This is how I envision this is going to end up happening. It has yet to end up happening the way I wanted it to. And that's why you have to like every time I tripped or fell on the process of doing stuff, I didn't give up. I just stopped, reassessed, pivoted as needed, gained clarity in that moment because now I'm a new person than I was the day before, the week before when I started the project, and figured out, okay, from this moment forward, what is my vision? Is it still where I started or do I need to adjust? And that's that filling in the gaps. You start with a broad picture and you fill in the gaps closer and closer, and sometimes you just scrap the project altogether and grab a new sheet of paper because you're like, you know what? I needed to do this project up until this point, and now I need
Right.
to reassess because now this is something greater is being called for me.
Right. And you would have never known what that greater thing was unless you tried
The other
something to
stuff
begin
first.
with. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
you should always try something, because as long as you're trying something, you're always doing more than the guy sitting and doing nothing, right?
Mhm.
So
And I
I,
think that
I I
that's
agree.
I think that that's a huge, I think there's so many people, I think everybody has the potential, to do great things with their life,
Oh, absolutely. Every
but
single one of us.
we're conditioned to have a limited mindset and thinking like, well, our motivation or discipline only goes so far, and
Well,
then you see
sure.
these people, and the problem with social media these days is that you see these 30-second reels of the beginning and the end process, and that looks like such instant gratification. Sometimes it's like those like physical transformation stories where people, they lose 150 pounds because they put in the work, but you didn't see that that took a year and a half, 2, 3 years, and every single choice they made along the way, every emotional breakdown, all you see is 30 seconds of somebody's success. And we're like, oh, I can do that. And we go out and 2 weeks later, we don't have the results. And they're like, never mind.
Right, exactly. Same thing with like working out. Like that's how I used to be with working out before I became more consistent and disciplined in it. Um, is I would go for a few days and just be like, oh, I don't see any results. There's nothing happening. So then I'd just stop and it'd be over. And and that was completely nonsense because muscle doesn't build overnight. I mean, it builds
Well,
overnight
it,
when you use it, but
but,
it
most people don't know that when you're
takes
working out,
takes a few weeks.
well, it takes a few weeks, but actually you use it or lose it, right? So the muscles that you're working on today, you have about 48 hours for that muscle to, keep up on it, to maintain it, to challenge it, to keep that growth process. Otherwise, it just maintains or goes back to where it was. So you have to stay consistent. You have to keep
Yeah,
going forward with it, because if you don't, and that's the same thing with discipline. Like, those growing pains that come with discipline, it's like a muscle. You have to build it. You have to tear it a little bit. You have to give it time to heal and to rest, because one of the biggest things I have found in this discipline and motivational journey is not undercrediting the like emotional mental work that goes into stuff, like having taking the time to mindset shift. I mean, I just told you today, I had some huge mindset changes with one of my coaches that I work with, and I had to take a nap because I was so tired after it. It's just like was mentally such a workout for me that I had to sit down and nap. And and giving people, redefining what success looks like, because a lot of people want tangible results, but it's that slow build over time that gives them the success.
absolutely.
And
And
even
then
with, oh, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say and add on to that, like the best benefit to consistency is seeing results. And once you start seeing those results, you're going to become addicted.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just like, oh man, this is absolutely awesome and it's working, everything coming and then boom, you're addicted to it. Now you're going to do it forever. So always keep that in mind as well, listeners.
Well, and it's
Absolutely.
true though, but the thing is that we do it for ourselves, but we don't see who we inspire along the way. I mean, I remember when we first started becoming friends and you were like starting to work out, and then you got involved with the groups that you've gotten involved with that motivated you to work out, and having seen you have that discipline and have that, well, I got to do this. I'm prioritizing myself. This is a goal I want to have. This is something I need to do for myself to get to where I want to be. It put my brain, as your friend, I was like, oh shit. I was like, if my friend can do that and can be consistent and to scale at that level, who's to say I couldn't, and it never occurred to me before that I could be that type of person, because I just figured like, oh, that's nice for people who have time, but I'm not that person. But, the thing I keep seeing on social media over and over again is replace I don't have time for it's not a priority. And so I started prioritizing myself. And as I started working on myself, I noticed the changes too in my emotional health, my mental health, my physical health, all that kind of stuff. And all started because of the ripple effect of one person in our life making the change. And so our listeners might be that one person in their life, in their family, in their friends group, in their community, at their workplace that starts making the changes. That's like, hey, if that person could do it, I could do it too. And not that it's competition, but it's inspiration. And we should inspire
Right.
each other to be better, because we are who we surround ourselves with.
Absolutely. And not to mention humans are um we're herd creatures, whether people want to believe that or not. Like we moved in ancient times as herds,
Yeah.
migration as herds, so we feed off of each other's energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the good point with You are who you surround yourself with, right? You're feeding off the energies of those who you surround yourself with, and that's perfect for discipline. Like if you want to stay really motivated, find some people that do what you want to do and hang out with those people, talk to them, get to know them. And whatever it is, could be anything. And you'll make that connection, and that connection will feed into you and motivate you and discipline you into taking those kinds of steps as well, and pushing you to be a
Right.
forward thinker.
And, some people are like really big introverts or have insecurities or, they're not there yet, and that's why we live in a culture where podcasts are such a great gift to people because you can find a community anywhere. I mean, I've listened to podcasts or I mean, when I finish a TV show and there's no more seasons, I go through a small grieving period because I'm like, man, these super important people in my life are now no longer a part of it, And, and so but that's just like a fake reality, and that's something that I had to learn to detach from years ago, so I'm in a better place now. But with podcasts or, people that we follow in public figures, like the listeners get to be a part of this community. Like I feel like we want our listeners to feel involved and to like share their successes and share their motivations and like tell us like, hey, you guys said this and I applied this and that really helped me get through this, and like, because we want to encourage, we want everybody has the potential for like true abundance, true fulfillment, true greatness in their life. And anybody who's sitting there is thinking like, yeah, that's just not me, or yeah, my situation limits that. You just haven't found the solution yet,
Right.
and when there's feels like there's no solution, it's because we've been conditioned to think in a very limited way that keeps us in a lacking mindset. Because if we're lacking, then we're mean like then other things can control us, you know
Absolutely.
and so I'm here to tell the listeners, you can do the thing. You can find that discipline and that motivation and the solutions in your situation and make the changes. But unfortunately, sometimes those aren't always the changes that you wanted, but they're the changes that are necessary for growth.
Yeah, and growth is not an easy process either. So, people who come in thinking, well, I'm going to change this and that and this and be like happy all the time. That's not how it goes. Because I used to hear that a lot too when I was searching, like during my searches. Oh, you could be happy, this, that, and the other, and you can be happy, and you really can, and that's part of, that's what you're working towards. But during that growth process, they don't talk about a lot of the negatives that are going to come your way. And when those negatives come your way, you're going to need inspiration. You're going to need people. You're going to need voices of reason to help guide you through that, because sometimes it gets really difficult. And that's why I like podcasts, because you know when it's difficult, I like to search for someone to help me, or even just listening to
Or
whatever, or
just
watching a
somebody that
video.
sounds relatable even.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps pull you through that
Because when I think with
transition.
relatability, when you talked about us being herd people, like we live very isolated. We all live in our own houses, our own apartments, we have our own lives. We used to live in
Right.
communities where we were all involved as herds. And
But
so like
now
now we
ev-
live in such an isolated state, and COVID definitely didn't help that. And now
neither
if
does
we get
TV or phones or any of that.
Right, because it draws us away from being present physically with people around us or going for a walk and saying hey to our neighbor. But, when I hear you say that, like relatability helps people feel like they're not the only one going through something, or they're not the only one alone. Even though logically they might know that already emotionally, they need that relatability still, you know?
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So
know I do. Some even today's I'll still be, something will be on my mind, and I'll have to find a relatable uh, subject or whatever it is that's bothering me to push me forward past it. And I'll usually find something that I need to hear. It'll pop into my head, and after they say it, and I'll be like, oh, that's what I needed right there. And then I can move on
well, and
and
that's because your mindset was open to I need this to be like hole in my life. And you're like, I have
I
this
need
problem.
understanding.
Right. I have this problem. I need the solution, or I have this obstacle. I need understanding. And as soon as you're like, okay, I need understanding in this department, then that opens us up to God and the universe, like giving us that. Right. And the
Right.
more it happens, like the more we practice that, the quicker it happens and the quicker results we get in our life.
Definitely. Absolutely. Well said.
Now, those are, I mean,
Definitely.
those are great examples. And like with our podcast, like I'm really, really excited because like you and I have talked so much about how even our own situations have been, relatable to each other, and that helped foster friendship, right? And I feel like having had for me going through a divorce last year and having that be such a difficult thing in my life, that wasn't the answer to the solution. That wasn't the solution to the answer that I wanted, right? Like I was hoping for any other answer, but at the end of the day, that was the solution. And it was a very difficult growing pain. And I had a lot of shedding from it. And I think that's what sometimes people fear with growth is the shedding process, because they feel like they might lose their identity, even though they might lose their people pleasing and actually gain their true identity, or they might lose certain friends that they might outgrow and gain friends that are more on the level of their mindset that they're at in life now. And and you find those friends that grow with you, or you just like, or you outgrow those ones and you keep moving forward. And and it's an uncomfortable metamorphosis, really, when
That's
we
right.
decide to grow, because when we just choose to do that, it's uncomfortable. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of change. A lot of people don't like change. They like their comfort. They like their because comfort brings safety. And honestly, in a world where most people endure trauma, like safety and security feels so good. But you have to ask yourself, is this really a safe, secure space of mind? Because I used to think I was safe and secure, and now I know I am, you know?
Right.
And it took a
Yeah,
lot of changing and a lot of shedding and a lot of breakdowns in the process to get to that. And that's why I want to
absolutely.
help the listeners to be like, hey, those tough days, like keep moving forward, because you know what? It's going to be even better than what you can imagine. And it's only just beginning.
A lot better. Yeah, definitely. Because the training even I put myself through, I'm a lot better off for it than not. So definitely. And I would love for the listeners
I mean, if you
to
wanted to
leave
make a
stories and
segue for your training, you could.
well,
Another day.
later
Another
later
day.
episodes we can get into some of that
Yeah.
and we can talk more about those things. But I was going to lead into like the listeners. I would love to hear stories from listeners and so that way even the listeners could come back, like if you visit our first episode and then later on come back to our 20th episode or something and kind of see what you yourself wrote or you yourself are looking for, or if it's different for you, just in that low amount of time, because change doesn't have to happen long term. It can
Mhm.
happen quickly, and it has happened quickly for even myself. But it just depends on what you're willing to put yourself through and how much you can take in without, falling apart in order to grow properly, because it takes a lot of willpower to help grow these through these pains in the beginning. And once you get it, like any other muscle, you're going to get used to it more and more, and then it's going to become easier and easier. And then by the next thing you know, you're going to be like, oh man, I don't even know why I was wearing in the first place ever. So
Or how many times have like we both said like, oh man, that would have been super hard like 2 months ago, but now it was a piece of cake.
oh, for sure, all the time. Like, so it does get easier. And for all you listeners out there, you know,
The
enjoy the process.
hardest, the hardest step I would say is just committing to getting started.
Yes, getting started is probably the most important step, but you also have to learn how to enjoy the process and trust the process as well.
Hmm.
Because I think once you learn to get past the negative parts of it and enjoy it, because it's becoming this beautiful um, expansion to your life. Your branches are expanding outward and taking in new waters. so to speak. It gets better, and it gets easier, and it gets more fulfilling, and it becomes more abundant and happy and joyful, and things start to change, and people will notice that, and people will notice your change. And when they ask you, you say, hey, I started with a motivation, and then I turned it into a discipline, and I continued to be consistent and pressed forward with all of my willpower to to make that desirable change.
First off,
So,
I have to say I love how you said that. I just want to like put a bow on this again because you said I took that motivation and I made it into a discipline and that made the change. And I love that so much. And I just remind, and the abundance, the joy, the happiness that you're talking about. I read a statistic somewhere that said, I feel like I read a lot. Keep hearing myself say
which is a
that.
good thing.
But I heard a statistic one time that said people are actually only happy 30% of the time, and the reason that I stopped seeking happiness was because I realized that happiness is very conditional and very fleeting, and it's a very superficial emotion. And I had to stop telling myself, well, I should be happy by now. I put in this much work. I should be happy, because I definitely had those pity party moments, but I had to change that word happy because I thought that's what I was working toward. When I got there and I felt like I wasn't finding it, I had to stop, reassess, pivot, throw happiness out the side and say, if I'm happy, that'll be a bonus. But what I'm really seeking is peace and joy in my life, because true joy is when you can feel like content, even in the saddest of moments. You can still feel like the good that is happening or the good that's going to come from this and the peace, that follows that. And so I had to stop seeking happiness and start seeking deeper, more core values, such as finding joy and peace in my life. Because there might be days where I'm like, oh, I didn't have like a huge flood of emotion, but I was joy filled in every task that I did, even if it was the most basic task,
For sure.
and
I
found
like
peace
that.
in that moment. And so that was one big thing that I had to do, is stop seeking what the media tries to sell us and start finding out what the root of those things are and seeking
Oh,
that
for
out
sure.
instead.
Yeah, absolutely. That was well put.
Because
Definitely.
happiness is an instant gratification, where joy and peace is a long-term fulfillment. And I had to stop choosing the instant gratification for the long-term discomfort and start seeking the temporary discomfort for the long-term fulfillment.
It's like checker to chess.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely. 100%.
I love that. That's a great analogy. So yeah, so discipline and motivation. Hopefully some of our listeners made sense of our first episode, and got some understanding from it. And I would like to challenge our listeners to maybe come up with something that either they want to get motivated over, or they themselves are already motivated by, and figure out what would that first discipline be to make that happen in their life. And
Yeah.
it's okay if it takes like a long time for them to even figure out what motivates them, because one question that people ask me often lately, which I still don't have an answer for, is, well, what's your favorite food? And I'm like, I really don't have an answer. I mean, I like all food. So, but like it's okay. And people have been asking me that for months randomly, and I still don't have an answer. And so, that sometimes might be the work, and getting to know yourself well enough to figure out what is that answer. And it might not be 1 week or one day, it could be, but if you live a life where, you don't put yourself first and you don't put yourself as a priority, you might not know anything about yourself. And that's what part of this journey is helping people discover who they truly are and getting them motivated and excited to discover themselves and to overcome those obstacles along the way, because everybody deserves to live a life truly as they are.
Absolutely. Got to get that fire back in your bellies.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta want that passion and that power to persist. That's what it is. So definitely, I agree. 100%.
So if there's one takeaway that you want to give this is my call to action for our listeners. Is there one, simple takeaway that you'd like to give them?
I would say I would tell you listeners that stay consistent. Stay consistent with your discipline because no matter what you do for motivation or who you seek for guidance, discipline is always going to take forefront and be the main objective, the main motivator, the main everything. Because if you don't stay disciplined, you're just gonna, you know, you're gonna fall apart and you're gonna fall off your plan. And you're gonna deviate back to your old ways, and that's not the goal and not the aim um, for the fulfillment of your own lives. I would say just stay disciplined and
Something that
consistent.
popped into my head when you were saying that was the point of discipline is that it's, and I know I kind of said this at the beginning, is that it's emotionless. And so you might feel discouraged, but you do the discipline anyways. You might feel excited, but you do the discipline anyways. You might feel
Absolutely.
neutral, but you do the discipline anyways.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I should have thrown that in there. But yeah,
Well,
because
I mean, I was inspired by your words to add that on.
yes. But no, that's right though. Like you have to you have to get past whatever it is that the world is giving you. Society is going to throw all kinds of stuff at you in your daily life, your job, your kids, your lifestyle, your habits, all these things that you're doing, you have to be aware of in order to
Mhm.
stay disciplined. And when you're aware of them, you can put that discipline in order and say, okay, this is what's stopping me. This is where I'm trying to go. This is what I need to do to get there. This is called discipline. And you follow that every single day. Rain, shine, snow, just get in the water, you know, just
Mhm.
just get in the water. And that's what you
And
got to do.
I'm gonna add on to that last little bit there for our more feminine energy individuals is, maybe discipline seems intimidating. So maybe, looking at it as what is distracting me? What distractions can I remove from my life to make space for that discipline?
Yes, absolutely.
So
Subtle, nice and subtle.
but it's true though, because a lot
It
of things
is.
distract us and that keeps us from committing to our discipline and keeping us
Yeah,
consistent.
yeah. And one of the main ones is televisions and phones. So if practicing putting your phone down just a little bit more each time helps, do it. Turning off the
Mhm.
TV a half an hour early, do it. Or
Or
I'm
putting
only
a
gonna,
book or a journal on your nightstand. So when you turn the TV off, you have that book there and you don't have to read it, but you know it's there and eventually you will pick it up.
yeah, absolutely. Subconsciously reprogramming.
Hmm.
So
I love it.
absolutely.
So our call to actions for our listeners, figure out something that motivates you that you want to make into a discipline. And as Joshua said, just be consistent with what that looks like and figuring out how you're going to implement that into your life in a joy and peace filled way. So
Awesome.
until next time, we will talk to you guys next week. Can't wait to hear about what you come up with.